Hey everyone, welcome back to 51%'s Crypto Research Podcast. I'm your host, Tom Shaughnessy. Today I'm on Noah Pierau to discuss the cryptocurrency Decred. This is a timely episode since we recently released a deep dive on Decred and governance on 51pct.io. Our conversation covers everything governance, from Bitcoin to Ethereum, and how Decred approaches governance through a hybrid proof-of-work, proof-of-stake system. Decred's interesting because token holders have control not only in the validation of blocks, but also in changes and upgrades to the platform in real time. These changes are submitted by anyone through Politia, an easy-to-use interface, the front end of which is hosted on any website, to propose changes to the system and vote on them in real time. In this way, token holders have control over the future of the platform in real time. 10% of all block rewards in Decred go into a treasury, and token holders vote through Politia to vote on how to use these funds. As such, Decred takes an innovative approach to solving ongoing funding. For those who are unaware, we have one of the first and most extensive reports on Decred available on 51pct.io. Our research is read by top funds, analysts, and investors around the world, and our listeners can take advantage using coupon code 50 for 50% off a retail subscription. Take advantage today. It's a no-brainer. With that, here's my conversation with Noah. Hey everyone, welcome back to 51%'s Crypto Research Podcast. Today in the podcast, I have Noah Pierau, a blockchain enthusiast, a governance researcher, and a community manager at Decred. Noah, how's it going?
Hey Tom, thanks for having me. Great, I'm doing great. So I'm happy to dive into the conversation around blockchain governance.
Yeah, well, it's a pleasure to have you on. Well, Noah, let's get quick started with a quick overview of yourself. How did you get started in crypto?
Really, the first time I heard of cryptocurrencies was in 2013 when one of my friends was mining Litecoin at his student apartment. And literally what he had is a few GPUs running in his room. And it was winter that day, and he didn't have to turn on the heating at all. So that was like a really absurd introduction into the world of cryptocurrencies, and I only got involved later in 2015 when I started considering to invest myself, and that was also the time that I discovered Decred, which was doing an airdrop around that time, and I signed up for the airdrop and. I was one of the 3,000 people to receive the Decred airdrop, and ever since I've been involved in the cryptocurrency ecosystem.
Yeah, it's a crazy way for your friend to heat his house at the time, but it's super interesting.
Yeah, well, I do have to say I live in the Netherlands, so the winters are not that cold there, but it definitely is an interesting way to heat your house.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. Well, for those who are unaware, we recently released a 20-page report on Decred and just in governance in general. I think it's a huge topic that's going to get a lot more exposure in the next couple of years. Decred's tackling this in a novel way, so it's definitely interesting. But I think it makes sense now to start at governance and then work into Decred. So,
sure.
Let's give listeners an overview. I mean, what does governance mean to you? And I guess specifically in Bitcoin in general, like, do token holders in Bitcoin have control over the network? Do nodes, do miners? Where's the governance and the control in Bitcoin today?
Right. So maybe good to give a very broad definition of governance. So governance really means collective decision making, right? So as a group of people, you need to be able to move together as a unity. And you have to make decisions as a collective. And especially as a decentralized network, you need to be able to make decisions. And blockchain governance is really about that. Like, how can we move the project together and choose our future direction? So that's really what governance is about, I think. And there is two main thoughts on Bitcoin governance. Some people say that Bitcoin has no governance, that it's a complete anarchy. And there are others who say, and I'm one of those people, that Bitcoin does have governance. And just because it's not clearly visible on the outside, there is still governance mechanisms going on the inside. And I think one of the main mechanisms in Bitcoin governance is the concept of forking. So that's when the chain splits in two. Some people decide to run a different version of the software, and you get basically two versions of Bitcoin. And that happened notoriously with Bitcoin Cash, but there's many other different versions of Bitcoin already existing. So
that's interesting. Yeah. No, so I mean, for those who are unaware, there's a lot of different parties in Bitcoin, right? We have the miners, we have the people who purchase Bitcoin's tokens, BTC, and then we have not the miners, not the token holders, but just the thousands of nodes out there that are running full nodes to, keep the history of the network. I guess some pushback people get when they talk about governance of Bitcoin is that people say, hey, the miners are very centralized, but they don't have control of the network because anybody running a node, the thousands out there, can just run any implementation of Bitcoin that they want. And that's kind of like a governance feature because they could decide to implement one software or, go with another. Do you see this as an issue or like a real governance mechanism for Bitcoin?
Right. So there's different groups that have sovereignty in Bitcoin. So, of course, there's the proof of work miners, but there's also the developers. And as you mentioned, the full node operators, the economic node operators, so the exchanges, and of course, the major holders of Bitcoin. And while everyone has a certain influence in the network, it's really only the miners who have right access to the chain. So, if the miners don't support a certain version of the software, the chain simply can't continue without them. So you can try to spin up all the nodes that you can, but it simply won't happen. So there is certainly an influence that full node operators and that economic nodes have. But if you look, there is a limit to that influence. And
Got it.
There is the funny analogy that I had seen before is that basically if you elect a leader that people don't agree with, so what you can do is you can start rioting and you can start burning cars, but it would be much better to have a voting system that you actually agree with and that you can influence the decisions that the leader is making. Right now, basic token holders or full node operators don't really have a ton of influence what happens in the Bitcoin ecosystem. That's mainly by the people who write the code and the people who write the chain, the miners and the developers. So yes, token holders and full nodes do have some influence, but in practice it's very limited.
Got it. So no, just for disclosure, I own Decred tokens, and other disclosures. I don't think Bitcoin's going anywhere, but the governance conversation is worthwhile for everyone to have and not just dismiss.
Yeah.
But people say like on Twitter and everywhere, I could just run my own full Bitcoin node on whatever software I want. But like, let's say there's a contentious issue that comes down the line. It seems very hard that thousands of nodes could easily coordinate just to run like a certain implementation, right?
Yeah. So yeah, what happens in Bitcoin whenever there is two competing versions? One thing is that nodes will start signaling which version they support. But the problem is with running full nodes is that it's not Sybil resistant. And what that means is that it's trivial to spin up 1,000 or even 10,000 nodes that signal that they support a certain version of Bitcoin. While in reality, there is very little capital actual Bitcoin holders that support that version. So the lack of Sybil resistance is it makes it a very bad governance system. And then what happens, even if there is a consensus that, like, let's say 60% supports one version and 40% supports the other version, that 40%, if they have enough miners supporting their version of Bitcoin, they can still fork off the chain and start their own project. So you will still have a hard fork, you will still have a network split, and you will still have all the disastrous effects that result from that.
That's super interesting, Noah, and I think that gives us a good segue into kind of the other ways to approach governance. And one of the things that drew me to Decred was that token holders have real control over the network, not just in validating blocks, but also in proposals for the system.
Right.
So
right.
I think it's worth, totally. So I think it's worth getting into. I mean, so Decred, MakerDAO, Tezos, EOS, they all offer some way of token holders to have control over the network.
Yeah.
Let's go into, just before we get into Decred's governance, I mean, let's just go into a little bit of the history of it. Is Decred a cryptocurrency or a platform, and maybe just some of the history of it, just to give a good overview?
Right. So there's a lot of confusion because there is roughly two kinds of cryptocurrencies. There are the smart contract platforms, and there are the store of value means of exchange projects. So really the transfer of value. And Decred falls in the latter category. It's really just like Bitcoin, just like Monero. It's a payment network. So right now it's a digital store of value, and over time it will evolve into a means of exchange and ultimately a unit of account. It's really related to Bitcoin, and definitely not to Ethereum or EOS or Tezos.
Got it. So basically, a cryptocurrency today is definitely the focus, which is interesting.
Definitely. So what I want to add to that is that right now we have this vision for Bitcoin. It's an iteration of Bitcoin, so it's based on the Bitcoin protocol, but it is not only proof of work. It's a hybrid of proof of work and proof of stake. So we improved significantly on Bitcoin's model, but we have the philosophy that the stakeholders are in charge. So anything that the majority of the token holders want, that will happen. So it is possible that Decred will move into the smart contract realm eventually, if that's what the token holders want.
Got it. That's super interesting, Noah. So let's go into the governance specifically within Decred, and let's not go to proposals yet, but let's just start with the validation of blocks. So can you explain to us where miners play into the network and where stakeholders play into the network? Because you guys have this hybrid consensus mechanism.
Yes. So a really simple way of looking at it is that the miners are the ones that create the block, and then the proof of stake voters are the ones that validate the block, and they keep each other in check. They balance each other out, and the stakeholders or the voters can vote to invalidate the transactions in that block, and the block will still stay on the blockchain, but just the transactions will disappear. And it's also possible for stakeholders to not vote on the block at all. And this means that the block cannot be added to the chain, because a block needs at least 60% of more than 60% of the valid votes, and it needs at least 3 votes. So at least 2 out of 3 votes. And in total, it's a maximum of 5 voters per block. I'm maybe getting a bit too detailed here, but that's how it works.
No, that's fine. That's what we're here, and that's what we're interested in. So basically, you have miners compiling transactions, forming blocks, and working the network. And then for every block, you have your stakeholders who lock up their Decred tokens to get tickets, which I think we should go into. And basically, every block, 5 of them are randomly selected to validate a block, right, and 3 out of 5 of them have to agree.
Right. Yes, that's the
Got it. So how do Decred stakeholders lock up their tokens to get tickets to take part in this validation process? Is it hard? Is it easy? How does it happen?
Right. So one of the most famous implementation of a proof of work and proof of stake model is masternode systems that were introduced by Dash. And masternodes are quite difficult to spin up. You need to rent server space. You have to. I looked into it myself, and it was quite complicated, at least for me as an average investor. But with Decred, it's really super simple. Like you open up your wallet. You need to have enough tokens to participate in a full ticket. And if not, you can also do a ticket split with other holders. And basically, you can straight from your wallet, you can lock up your tokens, and you have a ticket. Just straight from your cryptocurrency wallet. And right now, it's only available. The voting is only available on desktop. But we're looking into mobile wallets as well. We're making rapid progress on that.
Got it. So you guys, I mean, your block rewards are pretty interesting. So 60% of your block reward goes to the miners, 30% goes to proof of stake validators, split between, I guess, the 5 per block that have to choose. And then 10% goes in your treasury, which we could discuss a bit later. But, worst case scenario, Noah, let's say that the miners compile a block and the proof of stake validators, 3 or 4 out of 5 of them say, this doesn't make any sense. We don't want this on our network, and they invalidate it. What happens next? Do these transactions just not get cleared, or do we circle back to the miners? What happens?
So basically what happens is the transactions, the regular transaction tree goes back into the mempool and is waiting for a new block to be mined. That's basically what happens.
Got it. So it gets consistently harder as time goes on to revert transactions, it sounds like.
Well, just so you know that the action of the stakeholders is not really to disprove the transactions. It's rather to correct the behavior of miners. So, for example, if miners want to mine empty blocks, the stakeholders could vote those blocks down, and that's really the purpose of the block validation. And block validation as well prevents selfish mining. So miners hiding certain blocks from the network and then publishing 6 blocks behind each other in order to maybe perform a double spend attack. Those kinds of attacks are prevented with having a hybrid proof of work and proof of stake system, because every block needs 5 valid votes in order to be added to the network.
That's super interesting. Now, and 2 of the things I like about the lottery system here is that those who stake their DCR to get tickets, they're randomly selected. And this prevents collusion or problems there. Have you seen any collusion to date between those voting on the network? It seems to me it'd be very hard to do since the process is random.
We've explored the theoretical possibilities of an entity attacking the Decred network. And what's interesting with hybrid proof of work and proof of stake is that you need both hashing power and stake in a network in order to attack the Decred ecosystem. So that's something that's really interesting. Like hybrid proof of work and proof of stake brings out kind of the best in both worlds. And this makes Decred much more expensive to attack. And it was estimated that it's more than 20 times more expensive to attack compared to pure proof of work.
Yeah, I find it super interesting that you guys, to attack the network, you not only have to have all the mining power, you also have to have the stake. Right. You also have to lock us up for tickets. And then you also have to be randomly selected.
Right. Yes. Yeah. That's that makes it interesting. Yeah. I mean, we're actually looking for academics who are interested in investigating this kind of hybrid model, because Decred has been existing for nearly 3 years now, and we haven't had any 51% attacks on the network.
Yeah, that's interesting. Given Ethereum Classic had an issue with that just last week.
But yeah, we're interested in having academics explore the theoretical possibilities and also maybe calculate costs and compare it to other consensus mechanisms. So yeah, if there are any people in the academic field listening, we would invite you to research Decred. And check out the hybrid proof of work and proof of stake consensus system, and write a paper on it.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree that I think it's more secure from attacks on a relative basis. My only concern with it here is that you guys are somewhat new. You're gaining exposure, but you haven't had a lot in the past. So your market cap's only 150 million, which is well below Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So I think on a relative basis to market cap, you're more secure, but overall to Bitcoin, I think it would be a lot more expensive to attack Bitcoin.
Definitely. The 20 times more secure is talking about an apples to apples comparison. So yeah, if you look at absolute values, then definitely it's much more expensive to attack the BTC network.
Yeah, that's interesting. And no, the other thing I really like about the proof of stake process in Decred is that stakeholders have to wait around, I think, 28 days to vote their tickets. It kind of locks them in and aligns them with the system. And Ethereum with Serenity is working on a similar lockup period. It changes every time I check the spec. But how do you think about this lockup period? Do you think it helps align stakeholders with the process?
So what's interesting is that the proof of stake systems should really be designed with vote buying in mind. So if you have, let's say, a large entity that wants to short Decred and then buy up a lot of tickets and make a very terrible decision, then try to sell all their tickets immediately and cash out. That's not possible. So the system is designed with game theory in mind, that larger stakeholders will be kind of tied into the system, because the more tickets you have, the longer potentially your stake will be locked up. So it's a probabilistic process, and the average time to vote is 28 days, but it can be much longer than that. So it can take up to 5 months for your ticket to be selected. And yeah.
Got it. And no, I think the current price is, I think it's 110 DCR to buy a ticket. And I know that you guys have done some innovation on ticket splitting, but I mean, that's still pretty expensive. It's like, I think $1,500 for a ticket or something like that.
I mean,
what's your take on that?
Yeah. So, excuse me. So essentially when you look at, for example, masternode systems where it will cost 1,000 Dash to run a masternode, it's still kind of cheap to have sovereignty as a token holder within Decred. And I think definitely ticket splitting will be essential going forward to also let smaller stakeholders have a say in how the network evolves.
So in Dash, it's around 700 grand to be masternode. Okay, and in Decred, it's about $1,500. Does being a masternode in Dash get you any capabilities that you don't get on Decred in voting, or is it basically apples to apples on the voting structure?
I would say it's the other way around. So with Dash, what the masternodes do is mainly voting on budget. So how to spend the super blocks. And in Decred, the token holders or the voters have much more say in what happens to the network. So we already discussed block voting, but we also have consensus rule voting. So it's basically upgrades to the protocol. And then there's also the funding, so the budget system. And
we're definitely going to get into funding later. It's one of my favorite aspects with Decred. But just staying on the token holders having some control here, let's go on to not just validating blocks and consensus. Let's go on to proposals and changes through Politia. I never know how to pronounce it.
It's a Greek word that means a system of government. And I say Politeia, but it's how you like it.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a better pronunciation to me. But basically what you guys have is you have this live proposal method where people can use their tokens to not only propose changes, but to vote on them in real time. And this isn't consensus. This is changes to the network, where to spend money and stuff like that. Can you walk us through maybe this proposal system
sure.
now?
So it is really important to note the differences between the three different types of voting that the token holders have. So there's indeed the block voting, the consensus rule voting, and the proposal voting. And the first two that we mentioned, they are on chain, and the proposal system. So for voting on which projects get funded, that happens off chain. So Politeia is an off chain proposal system. but the data that is submitted to Politeia is timestamped into the Decred blockchain. So you still have the immutability of data, and whenever your proposal is, for example, censored from the Politeia website, you can always prove that you were censored because your hash will be timestamped in the Decred blockchain. So you have proof of censorship basically. So Politeia is a censorship resistant or transparent censorship proposal platform where anyone from the wider Decred community or basically anyone in the blockchain space can submit proposals, and where token holders vote on which proposals will get funded by the Decred treasury system.
That's super interesting, Noah. And I guess we have to talk about the treasury intertwined with Politeia, but basically 60% of your block rewards go to miners, 30% goes to proof of stake validators, and 10% goes in your treasury, which then these users can vote to basically use. I think that does a lot for solving ongoing funding. We've seen obviously issues with Steemit, ETC, cutting devs, etc. So I think that the ongoing funding is a huge part
Definitely.
for you guys.
Yeah, it's and one thing to mention also that Decred's treasury system is designed in a way that 10% is going to a Decred address and will build up until we decide to use it. Whereas, for example, in most masternode systems, it's a rolling budget. So if the budget is not spent that month, the tokens are burned. So that's also a major difference. With Decred's treasury system and other funding mechanisms.
Yeah, that makes sense. So basically, I think how it works is people go on proposals.decred.org and they could submit a proposal. These are reviewed by admins, and then the valid proposals appear publicly and they're open for discussion. And then there's a ticket voting interval, and then ticket voting starts, and then the voting period ends, and it's either approved or rejected. Is that basically the Politeia process?
That's a very broad overview indeed. Yeah, proposals.decred.org is really the place where it happens. But it's also important to note that this whole system it's designed to be very versatile. So you could host it on any other domain name, and you could even run mirrors of this proposal system. But yeah, the process that you described is I think indeed how it goes. And also note that we're still working on this. So this is an iterative process. So we're figuring out what works and what doesn't work, and we will tweak the system as we go forward.
Got it. And no, it's pretty easy to vote, though. I mean, right? You just go on your wallet, you go down to tickets, and you could basically vote on things you want to change. Or is that just for blocks themselves? Like the voting in the Decred wallet, is that for governance, or is that also for these proposals?
That's also for these proposals, yes. There is going to be a governance tab, so like a special section for governance proposals. We are working to make the wallet even more user friendly, so it's also subject to change. But yeah, it's our philosophy is that everything that matters should be available from within the wallet.
That's interesting. I know, I think it makes sense to kind of round out what the power of this platform. And one of my views in crypto is that you have to be able to evolve the fastest and to survive, and forking kind of hurts that because you split the community in pieces. But, on Decred, you guys had a governance event through Politeia back in early November to implement ProgPow to negate ASICs, and Ethereum's kind of wrestling with that right now. And if Ethereum had Politeia, basically token holders could vote on this. Do you think that Politeia is going to be used for major changes to the network? Let's implement a research like a Lightning or a payment channels network, or do you think it's going to be for small things like let's do advertising or let's bring on a PR firm or something like that?
So basically right now we've seen policy changes, for example, to change a certain concept. So for example, change it from proof of stake mining to proof of stake voting or proof of stake validators. So, and we did decide to hire a PR firm. But it could be potentially bigger projects as well. So, for example, one project that we saw proposed was like a Decred exchange. Like some guy showed up out of the blue and wanted to build an exchange, and he was asking for an insane amount of money upfront to build this Decred-X, and with kind of no community support, and that proposal was slammed down by the voters. So you will see some bigger proposals as well. Like it's not all going to be petty and polite. There will be some big proposals, I think, and yeah, there will be. It will be very interesting to see what will happen in the future.
Yeah, that's interesting. And no, what's your takeaway though on like fork resistance through this system by deciding on things? Like, are you a fan that Decred's kind of resistant to forking in a way because stakeholders have to agree on these changes, or do you think that forking could be good for a community where, you know, two parties can go their separate ways?
So I fully believe in freedom of choice. So when people decide to use the Decred network or the Decred, or to participate in the Decred project, that means that what the majority of the token holders see as the most logical way to move forward, that's what's going to happen. So being able to decide as a token holder what you want to see, I think that's very powerful. And Decred keeps the community together. So due to this hybrid proof of work and proof of stake consensus mechanism, there won't be any forking. I think that's a big advantage, because I think forking is harmful to the network, to the ecosystem, for various reasons. But also, it's good to note that it doesn't mean that people cannot take, for example, the Decred code and start their own project. You know, so it is possible, if people don't like where Decred is headed, they can copy the source code, because everything is open source. They can copy the source code and start their own project, but they would have to start anew. You know, so it's not going to be there won't be any contention which one was the real Bitcoin, because it will be clear to everyone that the real Decred is the one that the majority of the stakeholders support.
Got it. That's interesting. And Noah, let's go back to just a high level on governance. I mean, I think governance is the absolute killer feature for you guys, because it lets you guys implement whatever feature you want. Some people I've seen on Twitter have kind of said, oh, you know, Bitcoin could just implement something like this. In my mind, as these crypto networks grow in value, it's a lot harder to change things once they become larger. But you guys already have this evolutionary path kind of built in that'll allow you guys to make changes even when you're larger, right, potentially. Do you think that there's any way Bitcoin could implement something like Decred has, or
I mean, if such a change would be proposed, I'm very sure that it would cause a hard fork and a chain split for Bitcoin. So you know, there is a possibility that Bitcoin will adopt a hybrid proof of work and proof of stake system, but it won't be easy, and there will likely be a lot of blood in the streets, and it will cause a lot of confusion whether this is the right way to move forward or not. And without a formal decision mechanism, it will be really hard to gauge whether stakeholders actually want that or not.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, have you seen anything contentious so far in Decred, or maybe anything bordering on contentious? I know it's early and you guys are somewhat smaller than other cryptos, but I think it's interesting to talk about.
So when you say contentious, what do you mean?
Like any contentious issues that had to be decided where there was like a large majority on one side and, you know, a large party on the other side, and they said, you know, I want this for Decred, and the other side said, you know what, no, I want to go with this instead.
If you talk about proposals, yes, we've seen some contentious votes. I think one of them was hiring a PR firm. There are some people that really don't want to see any marketing, that want Decred to grow organically, and there is a slight majority that that's the value in having a professional PR firm to help us with outreach. So that proposal passed with 62%. Because it's also good to note that proposals are passed if more than 60% of the stakeholders vote yes, and then for consensus changes you need 75% of the stakeholders. So those are two different targets to reach. But as for proposals, we've definitely seen some contentious stuff there.
Got it. And Noah, what's like the participation right now by stakeholders in the voting process? Is this like a majority of Decred token holders are taking part in the proposals or the validation of blocks, or is this like a small minority?
The validation of blocks is everyone. So every ticket votes on blocks, and also when you're voting for the consensus rule changes, every ticket votes, but people can choose to abstain from the vote. So you have a setting to vote either yes to the new rules or no, keep the old rules, or you can abstain from the change. But all the tickets vote there. And for proposals, you actively have to vote. So there is a percentage that does vote, and there is a percentage that doesn't. And we're seeing that about a quarter of the people, of the stakeholders of the tickets actually vote. So that's around 25%. And the highest percentage that we've seen was over 50% of the tickets that voted on a certain proposal.
Wow! So you have half of your. You said tickets, though. Is that? Do you mean token holders for Parity?
So one token holder can own multiple tickets. So when we say that 60% voted yes, we mean that 60% of the tickets that voted yes on the proposal. So it's not necessarily one token holder, one vote. It's one ticket, one vote.
Oh, okay, so to vote on proposals in Parity, you need to also lock up and purchase tickets. You can't just hold tokens standalone to vote on proposals.
So that's one of the things that the tickets. They guarantee that you actually have skin in the game, so that you're willing to lock up your liquidity, to lock up your tokens, and to participate in the decision-making process. And I'm
looking on DCRstats.com, and it looks like 47% of the Decred tokens are locked up for tickets right now. It's a pretty high percent.
Around. I think that percentage has been stable over the past year, and then from those tickets, you will see that between 25 and 50% is voting on proposals.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, because I remember when EOS launched, and they raised $4 billion, and they were having problems just getting 10 or 20% of their users to vote to get the network started. Meanwhile, you guys have 50% of your tokens locked up and voting already.
But also, it's good to have sovereignty over your money. As we said, with Bitcoin, you can run a full node, but it doesn't mean that you have sovereignty. And as a token holder, you have a vote. No matter what happens, you have a vote. And this is a completely decentralized and completely trustless system where you make decisions together as a group of stakeholders. So I think that's incredibly valuable.
Yeah, that's a big item. And no, I mean, you can't actually have, it sounds like 50% to me is a way higher percentage in practice, because I don't think you could actually get 100%, right? Because we need some percent of these tokens available to trade and to use as a currency, right?
Are usually not participating in voting, because you have to lock up the coins. So it presents a risk for them to do that. So mostly the token holders will be long-term supporters, such as myself, or such as anyone who cares about what happens to their money.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And I was looking at just the fund, just using the foundation's funds through token holders is super interesting to me. I mean, we saw a few weeks ago Vitalik gave 1,000 ETH to 3 different teams randomly, which sounded awesome and everything. At full disclosure, I own some ETH and Decred, But I mean, it doesn't seem like that's a long-term sustainable funding model to me at all.
What Politeia is doing to the funding mechanism of projects within a blockchain ecosystem, I think that's really revolutionary, and I think you will see a lot of different projects adopting the same system. And maybe it's funny to note that one project has already copied the Politeia proposal system, and that's Hcash or Hypercash. They recently spun up almost a completely identical website, very similar to Politeia. They copied all the source code from the Decred GitHub, and it's really they just basically changed the logos, and they are running it, of course, on their own network. But that's funny to see that people are already starting to use Decred's solution for funding.
That validates your go-to-market strategy.
So what we believe in is, we're building this software for the Decred ecosystem, but essentially people all over the world can benefit from the software that is being built here. So that's also why we open source all the code. And the only thing that we ask is that there is some credit to the developers of Decred. So that's the only thing, and to the Decred project itself, of course. But yeah, anyone can use these tools.
Yeah, no, it's a hard. It's a hard thing for me to put into words, but I think that the ability to actually move faster, evolutionary for Crypto Network on every single proposal, that all adds up and snowballs into something great in my mind, because the lag between decisions on other networks and all the infighting and forks, I think over time that magnifies and hurts the platforms. So I think this evolutionary aspect of you guys is really worthwhile.
I couldn't agree more.
And no, just switching gears a little bit, you guys kind of address censorship through this platform in these ways. I know it's not coming up too much now, but there was talks of like censorship on like social media platforms like Twitter, or even forums like Bitcoin's forum, where the admins were censoring concerns or problems or discussions. You guys kind of address that because anybody can go on Politeia and submit a proposal, right?
Actually, one of the things that we were talking about is to spin up our own version of Reddit, and to let the whole Decred ecosystem discuss their ideas and submit posts to the Decred Reddit system, and have those posts, those threads, and all the comments timestamped into the Decred blockchain as well. So you have a truly censorship resistant Reddit, basically internet forum, and I think that's one of the interesting ways that you can use timestamps. But yeah, Politeia does essentially the same. It hashes the data that is submitted and timestamps it into the Decred blockchain. So you, even if a proposal is censored from the website itself, users that submitted the proposal can still prove to the wider community that they submitted this specific proposal at this certain time. And yeah, I think that's very valuable. Yeah,
that's interesting. Yeah, it's definitely valuable. And no, let's go to some of the potential issues here. I mean, the first two aspects of the voting that we talked about earlier are both on-chain. One of the concerns people have with on-chain governance is that once a event is approved, the update is like automatic. And that could be a concern. What's your, do you take any issue here with that?
I think that is a very interesting, I would say it's both a strength and a weakness, because the strength is that you don't have the forking drama that happens when there is no such formal upgrading mechanism. And of course, the weakness is that if you make a wrong decision, it will it will go into effect for the whole network. So the only thing that you can do as a community is to deliberate and to really investigate the change at hand and implement the best possible solution. And I think when you really, really do your research and really set all the facts straight, it will be kind of obvious what's the most logical path to take. And so for me, I think we will evolve as a currency in a very robust and a very cohesive way. And all the changes that you can make to the Decred network, you can test them on a testnet, you can test them on the SIMnet. So we will make sure that the consensus code changes that happen will be thoroughly tested and peer reviewed before we will actually put it up for a consensus vote for the token holders. So it's not like anyone can and like any developer group will suggest changes to the consensus code. No, it will be a very much a peer reviewed process, and then the token holders decide whether they actually want it or not. So the final final vote is always in the hand of the token holders.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I did a deep dive on Tezos on the site, and there's we have our research report out on them, and they have token voting too, but I don't think they have had any like actual votes yet that are like worthwhile. But one of the cool things about their process is that any changes are automatically tested on a testnet, which is pretty interesting, just to make sure it works and it doesn't cause any issues.
Automatic testing is always it has a certain risk because when you test something that's not covered in the automatic test, there's always those black swan events that can occur. So having a real testnet of different miners and implementing and tweaking changes, I think by hand is always like these are consensus rules that we're talking about. So just having an automatic process in place, I think, is maybe not enough. I think it should be very thoroughly tested, and code should be peer reviewed before it's ever proposed as a consensus rule change. So the process to get to a consensus rule vote will be very it is a strict quality control within the developer group of Decred.
That's interesting. So Noah, let's talk about the future for Decred a bit. I mean, I think me and you both agree that governance is a killer feature and it allows evolution much faster. But, what are we trying to evolve here on Decred? Are we trying to grow this into a platform where we can host, decentralized autonomous organizations or a decentralized Amazon, or are we trying to build Decred just to be the preeminent or eminent payment platform here?
I think the killer app of blockchains is money. And I think that being able to transfer value in a decentralized way is the most valuable innovation that blockchains have brought to the world. So I see Decred primarily as an iteration on Bitcoin. So for me, I would stick to the current plan of evolving as a store of value to means of exchange, and ultimately a unit of account. But it can be that the use case for blockchain platforms will change in the future, and that it might be interesting to move towards a different direction. And I'm open to having my mind changed. I'm a pragmatic person. I don't stick to ideas just because I've always had them. I stick to ideas because I value them as the best ideas. So yeah, anything is possible. Actually, it's really up to how we evolve as a project.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And just going back to like some potential issues that we could have on the network. I mean, are you seeing, like, let's say decades go by and you guys get to your $21 million cap, or not dollars, but 21 million supply cap on Decred, which is similar to Bitcoin. Let's say you guys are at 20.9 million. I mean, what's that conversation like on Decred versus that conversation on Bitcoin? Like, let's just say, for example, that transaction fees on Bitcoin and Decred don't make up enough for the miners, and they need block rewards, and we're running out. What would happen on Bitcoin here, and how would this proposal be addressed on Decred? I'm not saying Bitcoin's going away. I think it's great. It's going to be here. But just for the thought experiment here, how would this change happen on both?
How I would imagine it going within Decred is that one thing to also mention is that in order to have a similar amount of security on a pure proof of work blockchain such as Bitcoin or Litecoin, and on a hybrid proof of work and proof of stake blockchain such as Decred, you need a lot less hashing power to secure a blockchain to the same extent. So because you have the voters who will validate the proof of work mined blocks, the Decred chain will be more secure than a Bitcoin or a Litecoin. So on a relative basis, yes.
On a relative basis, right? No, it's a market cap.
Yeah. Ceteris paribus, like having all conditions similar, Decred will be more expensive to attack than a pure proof of work blockchain. But yeah, when you talk about like having to change the monetary base of Decred, I would be personally against it. I see no reason to change the 21 million maximum supply. I believe that there will be different solutions that will come up as we go forward. But as a stakeholder, I see no way to tamper with that 21 million maximum number. Like maybe we will have a super innovative new kind of mining algorithm that takes very very little energy, very little power, so miners can run their systems a lot more efficiently, and their costs will go down. So there will be solutions that we cannot yet see. So therefore, there is no way we can say like what's going to happen decades from now. But yeah, in principle, I would be against changing that supply cap, because that's one of the things that makes a digital currency such a good store of value, because it is scarce. There's only going to be 21 million of them, and I think that's one of the biggest selling points.
No, I totally agree with you. I think it's one of the biggest selling points out there. I'm just always concerned, what happens when or if transaction fees can't secure the network. You know what I mean? I think people are kind of discounting definitely how much block rewards are. But I don't know. I guess we'll have to see.
That we'll have to see. I mean, I'm open to having my mind changed on different ways of mining or different ways of consensus. Like there is plenty of solutions, or like that. There is some sort of redistribution system from very big stakeholders to the miners in order to sustain a network or something like that. There's all kinds of solutions possible, and with smart contracts, it's like programmable money. Smart contracts can also be opcodes that trigger a certain transaction to happen. I think there will be plenty of solutions possible, and I don't see any reason to change that 21 million maximum supply cap.
Got it. And no, I want to go into a little bit on the fork resistance of Decred. I know we've touched upon it, throughout the whole interview, on how you could maintain one synergistic community. I don't know if it makes sense to walk through the exhibit I have on the report, or the one I just sent to you on Twitter. But could you, if it does make sense to walk through it, we can. Why you guys are fork resistance, but I guess at a high level, if you could just explain how you guys are resistant to forks and what that benefit gets you.
In very very high level overview is that in order to fork, you need not only mining power, but you also need voting power. So when you want to create a fork that is not supported by the majority of the votes, the blocks that you mine will not have any votes on them, because the new consensus rules are not implemented by the majority of the voters. So the blocks will not be able to be added to the new fork, and therefore the fork will kind of fail to produce blocks. And meanwhile, the main network will go on, and you will see that the proof of work miners that are working on the forked chain, they will start to feel it in their pockets. They still have to pay the electricity bills, and if you don't have any block rewards, that's going to create an issue. So basically, by having that kind of proof of stake layer, which acts as a sort of two-factor authentication layer, like it makes the Decred chain more secure, it also prevents the contentious hard forks.
Got it. Yeah, I kind of think about it like if somebody owns 50% of the mining power in Decred, but only 25% of the tickets, and they're attempting to create a fork, it'd be kind of impossible because the majority of the ticket holders on the majority chain would just vote their tickets based on and the voting is based on the previous block because it's random. So the minority chain attacker would have to go back in time and get continually left back, which is tough.
Sometimes they might be lucky, and sometimes they might find a new block. It's without majority stakeholder support, it's really hard to fork the Decred network. And what's funny is that it's fork resistant.
Got it.
So what we mean by that, it's very hard to fork. But if you have majority stakeholder support, which is exactly what is happening during a consensus rule vote, we check whether the majority of the stakeholders support upgrading to new consensus rules, and if that change is supported by more than 75% of the tickets, the voting tickets, then the network hard forks, but then everyone on the network upgrades. So that's kind of the paradox. Like Decred is fork resistant, but if a consensus rule vote is activated, then it's a scheduled hard fork, let's say. So I think that's the power. Staying together as a network is, I think, one of the main unique selling points of Decred, like cohesively evolving as a digital currency.
Yeah, I agree, Noah, and I think that forks and contentious issues get a lot of press on Twitter by retail investors and traders, but I don't think people realize how disastrous it is to have a developer community split in two.
The fact is that there are not a ton of developers who can write solid consensus code. Like it's really, really hard to have solid developers. And when a project forks off and steals away some of your development capacity, that's a huge loss. And I think at all times you want to stay together on the project.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Well, Noah, I mean, in the back of your mind, are you do you consider yourself like governance maximalist, or do you think that coins that don't have governance will fail?
So I think
what's your take on that?
Every coin has a certain governance mechanism, whether it is formalized on chain or whether it is off chain. So, for example, when you look at Monero, they have a form of rough consensus building between developers and the community through their forums. But the only question is whether it's a Sybil resistant or whether it is a governance based on the principle of skin in the game and equal opportunity. So I think every project has governance. It's just the way that it's organized that will set a project apart, and it will determine whether a governance system is actually reliable or not.
Got it. That makes sense. And Noah, are there any changes that you want to see specifically in Decred now, or are you happy with where we're going? Or is there anything that you're kind of pushing for to change?
Will be coming in a very short term. One of them is simple payment verification, SPV. And in order to make it super secure, you need to. So I'm not a super technical guy, but you need to change some stuff in the block header, and in order to make the SPV more reliable. so that might be a consensus rule change that we'll see in the future. I'm personally also in favor of implementing dynamic block sizes, so you don't have the question of whether it's going to be enough to have 1 megabyte or 2 megabyte or 10 megabyte blocks, but the block sizes just scale with the usage of the network. So I think that's something that we will see, I hope. And another change I'm really excited for is the privacy features that are being developed by the Decred developers right now. And yeah, I'm anticipating a consensus rule change as well for that.
Got it. And no, I know we're harping on this, but a lot of Decred's competitors in the payment space, whether it be Litecoin, Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin itself, not Bitcoin itself, but let's say Bitcoin Cash and Litecoin, they make large initial changes to create their networks. Like let's change let's change the block time, let's change the block size, like major things at the start.
Yes.
But you guys could make these changes over time. I think that's a big differentiator that people have to
really, you know, it's
hopefully.
It's quite exciting that you as a token holder have a say in what happens to the network, you know, and how it evolves over time. And I think that's one thing that sets Decred apart, is that the holders actually have an influence of where the project is going.
Got it. And like I said, I don't think Bitcoin's going anywhere, but I think that, like, let's say Bitcoin gets Lightning Network. I mean, they already have it, but it's small. You know, what's your take there? Can you guys like copy and paste this, or could you guys, research your own? How does that work?
Just really simple is that we are already building the Lightning Network solution for Decred, and some of the Decred developers are really close with the team that is building the L&D implementation of Bitcoin Lightning Network. So there is a lot of cross-pollination between Decred and the Lightning developers. So I'm expecting it to be fully implemented on the Decred network as well. So the Lightning network it's going to bring a lot of new possibilities, and I'm really excited for it.
Got it. And no, one of my last questions for you. I mean, you guys get, every cryptocurrency gets attacked by, self-interested people on Twitter who, have a financial incentive to back one coin. And I'm honestly upset that Twitter isn't more open to coins they don't own, because it's, how it should be. But, you guys get compared to Dash a lot. I know you talked about the price of being a masternode, but do you think that there's enough similarities between you and Dash to coexist, or do you think one person wins here?
I mean, I think Dash has been around for a longer time, and they have built a very strong community. And I think that they are focusing on a very specific use case. So for being a digital cash system in countries where there is no stable currency. So for example, Venezuela is one example that they really focus on. And I think what you're seeing with Dash is really a very well orchestrated marketing machine, where Decred is more grassroots, bottom up kind of project, where the token holders actually decide how the project evolves, and not necessarily the core team that has all the power. So yeah, I think the masternode system has certain, it made certain innovations that brought the whole blockchain ecosystem forward. But I think, or I have the feeling, that the masternode system is on its retreat, because you want people to be able to vote directly from within their wallet, and you want them to vote on more things than just the budget. So, in terms of governance, I think Decred is a leap forward compared to Dash. But yeah, we'll see. We have no idea where this whole space is going.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm always wondering. I mean, I love Decred's governance features, and I love that its ability to grow in real time. My only concern is, whether or not we could build this into a platform to build use cases, or if it's, or not use cases, but to host decentralized apps and stuff like that, or if it's better to keep a more narrow focus on payments and innovating there, which is also a strategy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so how I really see it is that we're probably see use cases of blockchain of blockchain ecosystem projects that we haven't explored yet, and I'm really excited for those changes. And right now, the best you can do is prepare internally, build a very strong community, and be able to adopt those new opportunities as soon as they arise. So to jump in on the change as it happens. So you need to be able to move fast, make decisions. As a network, collectively decide to capitulate on a certain opportunity as it arises. So I think that, and that ties back to the power of governance. We need to be able to evolve fast, and we need to be able to iterate rapidly. And I think that Decred is very well equipped to do just that.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. And no, my last question for you, just to round out the governance talk here. I'm not sure how close you follow Ethereum, but they obviously have a very strong community of developers and smart people, and they're rapidly innovating on the platform. Do you take any issue with the way that they approach governance, or do you think that, it's obviously set to evolve over time, but there's obviously a lot of, different teams working on different projects, and we've seen some overlap and some timelines pushed out, stuff like that. Do you take any issue with Ethereum's governance currently, or not?
Yeah, it's very different if you are a smart contract platform, like a world supercomputer, or if you are focused on being a digital currency or a digital store of value. So I think Ethereum's governance model is very different from Decred's governance model in many ways. So for me, I'm not super concerned about how Ethereum developers think about governance, because it's just such a different context than Decred.
Yeah, that makes sense. I just think that a lot of teams, like I've had the Near Protocol team on, and there's some really smart guys there too. And they're basically, their focus is create a centralized team and we could grow, faster and release faster. But my issue with that is I think it's very hard to decentralize over time. But we'll see.
Yeah, I think definitely Ethereum is adding a lot of innovation to the space. So I'm really excited for that. And I've actually been to some Ethereum conferences, and the spirit of the community that you're seeing there is just magnificent. So I think that definitely has a lot of value, and I think we have to learn from each other and make each other stronger. And any insights that we can take from the Ethereum project, we'll be happy to adopt in Decred, and I hope vice versa.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the Ethereum community is killer too. And, I think they could adopt some things for you guys, like, Politia could be using Ethereum to decide where the Ethereum Foundation's grants are awarded, something like that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no reason they have to compete. Well, no, it's been awesome having you on. Is there anything I forgot to ask you that you want to discuss?
No, I just want to wish you a happy new year, and all the listeners a happy new year. If it's not too late to do that, I think 2019 is going to be great. And I wish all of you the best.
Yeah, and no, I know you answer a lot of questions on Twitter. Where could people find you or reach out and learn more about you?
People can find me on Twitter. It's basically Noah and then Pi, so the math symbol P, and you should be able to tweet at me or find me on Telegram.
Yeah, I'm going to link to you too in the show notes. Well, no, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Tom. Have a great evening.
Thanks for listening. Please rate, review, and share the podcast. Help other people find it. And use coupon code 50 for 50% off a retail subscription to 51pct.io.